Hi, welcome to Sheltering with Swami. I'm Swami Chaitanya.
Nikki Lastreto, and today we're going to talk about where we come from. What are our roots? And we're going to start off with Swami.
Well, before that, I want to point out this is our microphone with a little cover on it. It's not some alien creature or a cat.
This is our other furry friend, right close.
We want to make our sound quality as good as we can.
It's never far.
This is one of those Yetis. So what we're talking about, where I come from?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I was born in a place called New Rochelle, New York, which is right outside New York City. And it was settled by people from La Rochelle in France. And actually, the original ancestors came over like in the 1680s and stuff like that on my mother's side, and 1630s on my father's side. But anyway, for many years they lived in New York City, and then they moved out. But I was born actually in La Rochelle in 1943, right in the middle of the Second World War.
Yeah, you're almost 77.
Right, but see, the key thing, though, is I was conceived in San Francisco because my father was going to go to the Second World War in New Guinea, Australia. So my mother took a trip out, and they had a little tryst, and out of that I was conceived in San Francisco. Right, and that's how I connect to Nikki, right? Because she was born in,
I wasn't,
but she wasn't conceived in San Francisco.
Yeah, go on.
All right, and back to my story, right? So anyway, I grew up in New Jersey because we moved out to the suburbs of New Jersey, and my father worked for Bell Labs, so AT&T. And then I went to high school in New Jersey, and I went to college in Connecticut.
And you were quite a sports guy. I mean, no one thinks of that.
Oh yeah,
Swami,
in high school I
was
in three sports. I was actually the captain my senior year of the soccer team, the basketball team, and the track team. Right.
What a stud!
And actually, in soccer, we made it to the state tournament, and I was third in my class of hurdles in the state meet. So, yeah, I was very athletic. And I was a Boy Scout, and I also played the trombone in the high school band.
And you were the guy that wears the fancy hat.
Oh, right. By my senior year, I was actually the drum major of the high school band with like 60 people behind me playing clarinets and trombones and so on. But I had, this big white rabbit hat and a whole kind of fancy uniform, and I was leading the whole parade. Yeah, it was kind of fun. Yeah.
Very cool.
So I went to college in Connecticut, a very small little men's school, which has since gone co-ed, Wesleyan University in Connecticut. And I did pretty good there, actually. Yeah,
you did really well.
I was a scholar. Well, I was also an athlete there, too. But, I graduated Phi Beta Kappa. But strangely enough, I majored in German literature, if you can believe that, right? But I also studied theology and English literature, history, and so on.
And he does speak fluent German to this day.
Ich kann sehr gut Deutsch sprechen.
Yeah, it comes in handy. You never know.
Very handy, right. So then I graduated from Wesleyan in 1965, right? And you were 10 years old at that time, but I didn't know you yet, right? So at any rate, then I went to a university in Germany on a Fulbright fellowship, the University of Freiburg, and studied there for a year, and traveled around Europe. And actually, I also got married to my first wife right after I graduated from college, and she and I spent the year together in Germany. And we traveled to Spain and Italy and France and various places, Greece and so on. So it was really like a whole sort of, encountering the sources of our Western culture. I'd studied art history also and literature and so on. So it was just fascinating to be there. And I went to how many?
Well, and you had a son?
Oh, right. Then we had a son. I came back and I went to the University of Wisconsin. And there I majored in history. And I was there for a year. And then I went through a total psychologic convulsion and
psychedelic convulsion.
That wasn't psychedelic
Not
yet.
Quite
no,
yet?
No,
okay.
That wasn't quite yet. But I separated from my wife and my son and switched to the art department at Wisconsin. And between that switch, I came out to San Francisco in the summer of love in 1967. And spent a couple months here, and then went back for a final year at University of Wisconsin, where I studied art. And then I moved back out here.
And that kind of brings us up to date to 1967 when
68.
Talk about the hippie days. That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other
You're
story.
quite a guy, Swami.
Well,
okay.
I just
Thanks
did
for
what
listening.
I did, so thank you.
And where does Nikki come from? Well, my family came from Italy mostly. A few of them were from Switzerland, the Italian part of Switzerland. But primarily, the first ones that came to California came in, my namesake, Nicholas Larco, came in 1848, before the gold rush. And I'm very proud to be named after him. And then his cousins and nephews and uncles all showed up, who ended up being my great-great-grandfather, et cetera, et cetera. So I have very old San Francisco roots that I'm extremely proud of. And
don't you forget it.
Don't you forget it. And I still have a lot of Italian in me, too. I don't really speak Italian
but
fluently.
You got Swiss Italian, which is a little different.
A quarter Swiss Italian. I'm a
Okay.
half Italian. The other part's mutt. So, we're all kind of mutts here in America. But so I was born and raised in San Francisco. I was born in 1955, and just a perfect time to grow up in San Francisco. I mean, couldn't have been in a better place at a better time. And I was a very Catholic little girl, coming from an Italian Catholic family, of course. I was very into the saints and going to Mass and the spirituality side, the mystic side of Catholicism, as was my father, who was a really wonderful teacher for me. And I was not so into sports like Swami. I wish I could say I was, but I was more into going into church and kneeling in front of Jesus and praying, actually. And that was more my thing. I also went on to writing quite a bit in high school, which led into my career that I took up later. And at about 14 years old, something went off in my head, and I said, I've been praying and praying all these years in church to have a vision. I so much wanted to be like one of those saints and see a vision of some holy, miraculous mother of God or something.
But what year was that? 14? You were 14?
14, it would have been 1969.
1969.
And the hippies were all over San Francisco already at that point, and I was very curious about them. But being in a conservative Italian family, I was not allowed to go out and do much of anything. I was very, very sequestered at home. But by the time I turned 14, I just suddenly had a wake-up call, and literally within a week's time, I have it written in my journal, I said, wait a minute, I can make a choice here. I could become a nun and get really into this Catholic thing, or I could check out what these hippies are doing, because they look like they're really free spirits and following their hearts, and that intrigued me. And I am an Aquarius, and that kind of comes with part of my nature. So off I went to check out the hippies, and the rest of it is history. I met Swami when I was 14, just as friends and part of a large...
My beard was black then. Actually,
Yeah,
everything was very dark.
And he was called William. Yeah. And that was just part of like a large hippie commune thing that I ended up hanging out in, because in those days, 14-year-olds did things like that in San Francisco, and you were accepted into these groups of older hippies. And I was just all eyes and all ears and trying to learn as much as I could about this new way of life, of living freedom. So that's kind of where the Italian old gold rush spirit still comes out in me. I still remain a pioneer spirit.
But you used to come to North Beach, and that's where your family used to live too, right?
Exactly. So, the Italian part of San Francisco is known as North Beach. And we did not grow up there. My house was not in that neighborhood, but I went back there as soon as I could. It was just felt so at home there. And that's where I continued to grow up. I graduated from high school in 1972. I was the valedictorian, and I gave the speech Stoned on Acid. I'm very proud of that. Yeah. I'm very proud of that.
But what school was it? You didn't say what school.
Well, Convent of the Sacred Heart.
No, when you grow up in San Francisco and some says, what school do you went to? It means what high school did you go to?
Yeah, it probably doesn't mean college, which was 2 years at San Francisco State. And I didn't do much there other than sell a lot of weed, actually. But anyway, that's my
that's an old convent
spurious background, and gives you an idea who we are and how we met. And
we didn't talk about how we met.
Well, we met in 1969.
Okay, right.
Okay. Hey,
right.
thanks for listening.
Thanks.
We just wanted to share that. Take care.
See you later.